Welcome to this episode on entrepreneurship development. In this episode, we will continue our discussion on project formulation, which is what we had started off in one of the episodes previously. In fact, we are looking at problem formulation through a series of steps, and I'll just repeat what steps we had talked about in one of our previous episodes. What are these different stages of project formulation when you're trying to convert a new project idea into a reality? That's what the subject of project formulation deals with. The first stage is a feasibility analysis, which we had discussed. It is followed by a techno-economic analysis. That too we have discussed in the previous episode. It is followed by a project design and network analysis, wherein issues like the critical path method and the PERT program or the program evaluation and review technique as methods of network analysis are discussed. Then we move on to the next stage, which is called an input analysis stage. What do we think? What do you think we do at this stage? Input analysis. What is your idea? What do we do at this stage?
Like what are the raw materials which would be required? How to get them?
Okay.
Why to get them? How long can we get them? Like
Okay.
So not only raw materials, so all the different types of inputs which could be, it could be manpower also. Manpower could also be one of the inputs.
Yes, of course.
water
So,
supply,
manpower requirement.
electricity.
All kinds of inputs, material or manpower, fine. So the objective is to basically do three things. Identify the nature of resources involved. Okay. Number two, estimate the quantum of those resources required at different stages of the project implementation. And number three would be to evaluate the possibility of continued supply of such resources at affordable prices. Okay, so this is the objective at the input analysis stage. So you have to go into details about what are the different kinds of inputs and where from and in what way can you ensure uninterrupted supply of those inputs for the completion of the project. And trying to do this, you'll have to remember that resources of all kinds are needed at different stages of the project. A project does not, go through a single stage. It has several stages. In fact, and we say that the pre-investment stage, where you are just thinking about what kind of resources would be required, the involvement of resources is the least at the pre-investment stage, and they are maximum at the construction stage of the project, mind you. So the input of raw materials or other kind of input is not the same throughout the project life. In the beginning is very low because that's the time when you are investing mostly in manpower, people who are thinking, planning, rather than actual material inputs coming into the construction site. But once this project is on course, it started you started building the project, then that's the time when you require the maximum amount of inputs of different nature, and that's the most critical stage of the project because you have to ensure availability at the right point of time and in the right quantities and the right kind of raw materials and other inputs, which is what needs thorough and detailed planning. So resources will include, as you rightly said, both material as well as human resources. Different kinds of people would be required, for example, at the pre-feasibility and at the construction stage. You have to appreciate that. And so your manning of the organization will have to be as per that kind of analysis. Now, having done this, you'll move into something called a financial analysis. And this is a very critical step for the project formulation, I would say. As can be understood because it's a very significant impact on the final acceptability of the project. You'll decide to go for the project or not go for it based on, I think, if anything, most importantly, the financial analysis. How does what would you think will be involved here and the financial?
Something like estimation of the cost involved in the project, the revenue
Absolutely.
which is going to be earned from
Right,
the project.
the outflow of cost and the inflow of revenues. These are the most important flows that one has to look at the financial analysis.
So then how to raise capital, like based on this cost, how
Yes.
to raise capital, like what will be the quantum of fixed capital,
Correct.
and then what will be the, like, how much to be set aside for as working capital.
That is right.
So highest dividend earning project means the projects which can earn the highest dividends possible, sir.
Right. So I think what we are saying is correct, that we look into the revenue streams and the cost streams basically, and we try to find out how the two can be handled. Okay. And there are techniques by which the entrepreneur at this stage also can evaluate what are going to be the cost streams and what are going to be the revenue streams and what is therefore the right decision to make in terms of the investment. So we'll go into those in a lot of detail. And the whole idea is that you are going to incur a lot of cost, okay, and those costs should give you returns which are sufficiently high, and they should fulfill your expectation of the return. Because again, don't forget that you are evaluating one project idea, and there could be other project ideas. If you find that there's another project idea which is going to give you more steady returns or better returns or higher returns over years, then maybe that's a better project to pursue, rather than a project that does not give you as much return and as quickly as you want them. Okay, so this analysis is very important, because that's something that will help you trade off one project against another. Social cost benefit analysis. We mentioned this, that one step which many people don't think is important, but it is a very important step at the same time. What is the impact on society of this project? Okay, what are the costs to be incurred by the organization, and what is going to be the benefits that are going to be reaped by the society? It is important because if you want government clearances for the project, if you want financial institutions to back you up, you will have to show some social benefit accruing as a result of the project. Okay, it should maybe, let's say, generate employment for the local people. That's a social benefit, and every government would be involved or interested in generating employment as a result of industrialization. So that's one kind of social benefit. And maybe as a
Creating
result
facilities
of
for the society.
absolutely.
Something like opening up of primary schools and
Why not?
hospitals.
I mean, if it can
So
engage a
then,
lot of people,
building up bridges, flyovers,
right, amenities for the
creating a source of
people,
transportation.
absolutely, infrastructure building. Now, these things are always going to be favorably looked upon by the government in power, and they will grant clearance for such projects faster than projects which are not so easily justified on social grounds. Okay, so that's the point we are trying to make. You have to review the project's impact on society from different angles. How will society benefit? And mind you, it's very important, especially if you are going to embark on a public sector project, because for the public sector, the accountability is different. The financial issues are important though, but then what is more important is the socialistic implication. Will it generate employment? Will it, for example, will it be
Public
able to
obligations.
will it be able to substitute imports? For example, if you can do that, then the government is always going to take a favorable view of such a project. So how does the government look upon the project? A lot will depend on the social benefits that you are promising to deliver. Okay. So then I hope by this time you have understood that this analysis goes on for you to ultimately be able to prepare something called a feasibility report, which is what you will submit to the approving authorities. So finally, we have come to the project reporting stage, and the project reports basically mean two things. One is a feasibility report, and the other is a detailed project report. What is a feasibility report? This we all know by this time, that it really contains the details we have gathered from the ongoing feasibility studies, which is now presented in various tables and charts and statements. They are all consolidated into one final report, and that is the feasibility report. This report contains some background information about the industry to which the project would belong. You have to give a commentary of the state of things in the industry. What is happening currently in that industry at this point of time? Who are the major players? What are the good points about that industry? What are the deficiencies? So there's a background picture that has to be there and presented in the feasibility study or the feasibility report. Then it should also give a fair amount of idea to the approving authority about the enterprise who is submitting the report. What are the strengths and weaknesses of the entrepreneur who is submitting that report, who is asking for a clearance for that project? What is his background? Does the government or the financing authority feel that he is the right person, or his is the right organization to go along with? So you have to include these two aspects in the report. A report about the background of the industry to which the project belongs, and a section on the entrepreneur or the enterprise which is interested in starting that new project. Okay. Is required for the appraisal by the government authorities, we have said that, and to obtain maybe financial assistance from the financial institutions. That is the whole idea behind a feasibility report. Now, but that's not all. There's another important report which is also going to form a part of the reporting from the project. That's the detailed project report, or what we call in short the DPR. Now, the detailed project report is different in the sense that it goes into details more of a technical nature. The feasibility report is more of an overview of things, but the DPR.
Interrupt you, sir.
Yep.
Is this detailed project report the final step in formulation of a project?
You would say that, because the DPR forms the basis on which the project execution would start. So you will need to talk about specifications, technical in nature, the designs, the engineering drawings, maybe the site investigation report, the soil testing report, the building plan, things like that. And that's more technical in nature. So the DPR is a very technical report which you present, and by looking at that, the approving authorities understand that you have done a lot of homework and you are ready to launch the project once the appraisal is done and the approval is given. Now this in short covers up the subject of project formulation, and I think we take a short break at this point of time and we move into a discussion on the project appraisal, wherein we'll look into issues like the net present value analysis, or the internal rate of return, or the payback period is also a criterion by which the entrepreneur would evaluate how quickly he can recover the investment he has made. So that we will carry out after the break. We take a break at this point. Okay, thank you. Welcome back after the break. Before going into the break, we were discussing project formulation, and we have seen how through a series of stages one as an entrepreneur can understand how a project idea can be translated into reality, from an idea into something on the ground. And we are at the final stages of this discussion in the sense that we will now take up for discussion how projects are appraised, okay, by the entrepreneur himself as well as by approving authorities like the governmental agencies or the financial institutions who would extend financial assistance. All of these parties need to appraise a project and do so financially. So primarily we are looking at the financial appraisal of the project, and in trying to do so, there are different methods that can be employed by the entrepreneur. Some of the commonly used methods are what we would refer to. One of the easiest methods of appraising a project is what is called the payback period. Let me read through some of the other methods. Another method is called the average rate of return method. A third method that can be employed is called the net present value method. A fourth technique is the benefit cost ratio. And yet another method is the internal rate of return. So by some combination of these methods, or by using all of them, the appraising authority, which could be the entrepreneur himself or the approving authorities, they could have a clear understanding as to how the finances will work for the project, how the economics will work out for the project. Let's look at the payback period first as a technique. It is a very simple, straightforward technique of trying to assess how quickly the entrepreneur who is going to make an investment in a project will be able to recover the investment he has made. Within what time frame he will be able to recover the investment he has made. That is the simple understanding of a payback period. So what is a payback period? So to define a payback period, I would say is the length of time required to recover the initial cash outlay on the project. Let's understand this with the help of a very simple example that you can yourself work here. Suppose if a project involves a cash outlay of rupees 2 lakhs, okay, 200,000, and the annual cash inflows are, let's say in the first year it's rupees 50,000, in the second year it's rupees 80,000, in the third year it's rupees 60,000, and in the fourth year it's rupees 40,000. And suppose that's the 4 years constitute the economic life of the project. Okay, within these 4 years the project will have delivered whatever value it has had to deliver. So can we calculate the payback period from this given set of data? How will we do it? Now let's look back into the small problem. What is the original cost of investment in the project that we have talked about? It is rupees 2 lakhs.
Yes.
That's the original cost of investment. And what is the sum of the annual cash inflows? If we sum up these figures, 50,000 plus 80,000 plus 60,000 and 40,000,
2,30,000.
we have to understand this. When are we able to recover our 2 lakhs? Beyond that period of payback period, it is no longer an investment, because you are earning returns more than what you invested. So by what time are you recovering those 2 lakhs is what we are trying to understand. By what time if you look at the data, by what time are we recovering the 2 lakh
the amount
rupees.
which we invested at the beginning, the date on which
Yeah.
we are, means the date on which we are getting back that amount,
Yeah.
beyond which we are earning profits, sir.
That's right.
So that our requirement is that payback period, that very date.
So
on
just
which we
add
are
up.
earning.
For the first year, we are
Okay.
getting 50,000 as cash inflows. Second year, at the end of second year, we have got another 80,000, so 1,30,000.
And
At the
then
end of the
60.
third year, we have got 60,000, so
Comes
that
to
adds up to 1,90,000. But our original investment was 2 lakhs.
2 lakhs.
And then we still have got
10,000 short.
10,000 short, and in the final year, fourth year, we are earning 40,000, right? So out of that, 10,000 earned in the first quarter of the year, of the fourth year. So beyond 3 years, another quarter of a year is what the payback period is. Like 3.25 or 3.25 years is the payback period for this project then.
So
Okay.
in various cases, we can apply the simple interpolation technique also to determine this date, sir. In various
Yes, you can do that. You can do that. We have taken a very simple example for the understanding that my investment is 2 lakhs and how soon am I able to recover 2 lakhs by looking at the cash inflows. I can do that in 3 years and maybe 4 months, right? So 3.25 years, or 3 months in fact. So in 3.25 years, I'm able to recover the cost that I've invested. Okay. So that is my payback period. Very simple calculation. What is the benefit of this method?
So the revenue which I make after this period will come into my pocket.
That
would
is
be my
right. That's
profit.
right.
So
Now
that-
you have
that-
paid
that is
back
main
for the
means dividends which we are
dividends which you are going to earn as a result of the investment that you have made. Fine. So what is the how do you think this method is useful, or what is the suitability criterion of this method? If you look at it very simply, it's a very simple technique, number one, and it's suitable when the project has got a short gestation period. Like the example we took, the gestation is only 4 years. The economic life of the project is 4 years. Mind you, a project can also mean investment in a particular plant or machinery which has got to pay back for its own investment. That is also a small project within a project. So look at it that way. A short gestation period and the project cost is a small cost. We are not talking about a huge sum of money, 2 lakhs of rupees for investing in a particular plant, and we are able to recover the cost of investment in 3.25 years. When a firm suffers from a shortage of cash and depends on internal generation of cash, this method proves to be the best method of appraisal. When would you go for a payback period? When you are eager to recover the cost you have incurred by way of investment as soon as you can. If you look at it psychologically, an industrialist or an entrepreneur looks at the payback period when he is not very sure that he'll be able to recover the entire cost, and how quickly can he do that. He's a little hesitant about that. So this particular method helps him to have a clear understanding as how quickly he can earn back the investment that he has made. Okay, we'll keep it simple. Now look at, but then mind you, there can be 2 alternative projects or more than 2 projects where the investor has to take a decision as to whether I'll invest in project A or project B or project C. Now this can also be done with the help of the payback period. Like if you take 2 projects, for example, project A and project B. Suppose an entrepreneur is thinking of 2 alternative projects. One of the 2 he's going to take up, but then he has to take a decision which. And suppose he has found out that the capital cost for project A is rupees 15,000. Small project, 15,000 rupees is the capital cost for project A. For a different project, project B, capital cost is the same, 15,000 rupees. So at this point of time, he is unable to gauge whether to invest in project A or project B. But then when he looks at the cost or the cash inflows, the returns that is earning, that is savings after before depreciation but after taxes, let's say it has, if we look at the next 6 years, let's say for the first year, if we take down the data, in the first year, he recovers 5,000 rupees for project A, but 4,000 rupees from project B. In year 2, he recovers 5,000 again for project A, 4,000 for project B. Year 3, again he recovers 5,000 from project A and 4,000 from project B. Year 4, 2,000 from project A and 3,000 from project B. 5th year, 2,000 for project A, 7,000 from project B. Now the returns are increasing for project B, you see. And for the last year, the 6th year, he earns 2,000 for project A and 9,000 from project B. So if we add this all up, the returns, you'll find that project A gives him 21,000 rupees at the end of 6 years. 21,000, and project B gives him 31,000 at the end of 6 years, right? So what is the payback period? That is what is of interest. Now the payback period, you'll see for the project A, is
3 years.
3 years.
3 years. Why? Because he has invested 15,000 and is able to recover 15,000 after the third year.
Yeah.
Okay. So the payback period is 3 years for project A. But for project B, where the investment is the same, 15,000, he is able to recover it in
4 years.
4 years. Because if we add 4 plus 4 plus 4 and then 3, that makes it 15. Okay. So he's getting paid back for project B after 4 years. Although the total returns are higher for project B and lower for project A, but the payback period for project A is faster than the payback period for project B. So he might decide that if he is interested in a faster return of the invested capital, he might select project A over project B, although the total returns are more for project B. Okay. So I have told you about the merits of the payback period, but then do you see any weakness of the method? What is a possible weakness you could see in this method?
So first of all, sir, there is no time constraint involved in this method. Like what will be the maximum time within which I will be able to recover the money, like what I have initially invested in this project?
Why? He is recovering. The payback period is in fact the time within which he is able to recover the money.
So maybe that is the time. That may be not the deadline. Like I might set a deadline, like within this particular years, I have to recover the money. So here, after analyzing, that might extend this thing also. That might extend the time limit also.
No, but then that will depend on how accurate the figures of earnings are. Like how much are you going to earn over the years progressively? If your figures are reliable, then the payback period will also be equally reliable. If the figures are not reliable, then the payback period will also not be so reliable. Given that fact, do you see any other problem in this?
Can we say that this particular method lays more emphasis on short-term goals rather than long-term goals?
Yes, you can say that. You can say that. It is a short-term kind of a vision for the entrepreneur. It does not take a very long-term view of things. But then don't you see that there's one major glaring problem in this? It does not look at the time value of money. It is only looking at the returns at that point in time. But then what is, for example, if you're earning 10,000 rupees after 6 years and you're taking that as 10,000 only as of today. You're making the decision today, but then you're treating that 10,000 as if that's happening today. It's actually happening 6 years hence. So it does not discount for the time value of money, which is a very important omission, I think. It does not account for the time value of money, and that's a very important consideration if you really have to find out the cost of capital. Okay. So this is one major deficiency of the payback period, and that's the reason it is not a very very reliable method of taking a view of the project. There have to be other methods which will take care of the deficiency. For example, when we talk about the net present value method, and we will not have time to discuss that now, we'll come back and discuss that in yet another episode. But then we have to account for the time value of money in order to make a unbiased judgment as of today whether to invest in project A or in project B. So the time value of money factor is going to be introduced in the net present value concept, which we take up for a discussion in a different episode. So by way of conclusion, we can see that what we have discussed in this episode is project appraisal. Rather after the break, what we have discussed is the project appraisal. There are different methods by which a project needs to be appraised for its financial viability and suitability. One of the methods we have talked about is the payback period, which we have discussed with the help of a couple of examples. And we have seen that it's a very convenient method, very simple method. It gives a very clear understanding to the investor how quickly he is going to be able to recover the investment that he has made in the project. So to that extent, it brings down his perception of risk involved in the project. That way it's very good psychologically, but then it has got a very glaring weakness also. We have said that it does not account for the time value of money. It does not discount for the future revenue streams when they are being looked at today. And that's a major deficiency which is going to be handled and factored in by other methods. For example, the net present value method will do exactly that. It will convert the revenue streams of tomorrow into the net present value as of today and allow the investor to take a pragmatic decision as to he should invest in this project or not, or whether he should invest in this project or another project. That kind of decision is helped by such an analysis. So this is what we will discuss when we come back for yet another episode. We'll take up for a discussion the net present value method and further methods of project appraisal. So I think to conclude, we would say that we have looked at project formulation as a very important step towards developing the project idea into the final stages where we can submit a feasibility report and a detailed project report, and then that is also going to be subjected to appraisal methods, trying to understand whether it's financially feasible or not. So, so far so good. If you've understood all that, then we'll close this discussion for this episode. Thank you very much.